Hello, everybody. How are you doing tonight? You know what I have here? I have dominoes. Yes, dominoes. Look, dominoes. See, there's three. There's a three with a blank. There's a two. That's an important one. Just like this three is an important one. Okay? That's what we're going to be looking at tonight. Dominoes. All right. Welcome to another edition of Ambassadors for Christ Ministries. I hope that we have a good time tonight. I know I will. Okay? At the onset of this is a teaching time or an informative time, actually. Because I get asked by different people what I believe about certain things or what I believe the Bible says about certain things. And so this is one of those where I make a video because of that. Now, the very first thing, don't you just love modern technology? You get texted right in the middle of when you don't want to be texted. Yeah, I have to just, okay. So now I know. All right, so here we go. All right, here's the situation. The very first thing that I want to say tonight is that I have no intentions, okay, of singling out any Calvinist, okay? I'm not going to call out a name and say, you're an idiot or nothing like that, okay? Because that's not what I do, okay? I believe, and I'm going to just tell you this, I believe, first of all, that Calvinists, I have no reason to believe Calvinists are not saved, okay? I believe Calvinists are saved. I believe that Calvinists get, they receive the gospel, they believe in the death, the burial, and the resurrection of Christ. Unfortunately, after they get saved, like anybody else, whether it be an Arminianist, because I'm not an Arminianist either, okay? Like many people, okay, people get taught wrong sometimes. And do I believe the teachings of, or some of the teachings, not all, but some of the teachings of Calvinism are wrong? Well, yes, I do. I mean, if I believe they were all right, I would be a Calvinist. That's logical, isn't it? Okay. So I'm not a Calvinist. And there's a lot going on here lately, and there's people getting angry, and there's people saying, oh, Calvinists or this or no, listen. We all, at one point or another, at least those of us who, shall I say, have been a Christian a while, and we study for a while, and some of us study more. And I'm not trying to say that to anybody's chagrin or, patting somebody on the back and whatever. Just some people enjoy studying more than others. Some people have a drive to study more than others. And so maybe somebody goes to school and they learn. But not all schools teach the same thing. It's just that plain and that simple, okay? I'll give you a really short testimony. Myself, when I first got saved, okay? When I first got saved, in case you didn't catch, I'm playing with dominoes, okay? We're going to be looking at dominoes tonight, okay? But that's what I got in my hand. So when I first got saved, I immediately got under the tutoring of the man that led me to the Lord. And this went on for a few months. And after this went on for a few months, I moved 50 miles away or something like that, but I still drove up there and whenever I could. That's during the time, actually, when I was a Marine Corps drill instructor. Imagine that, a newly saved convert going to be a Marine Corps drill instructor. Wow, imagine that. A drill instructor that never cursed. Could you imagine that? Yep, I never cursed on the drill field. I was able to do a lot of witnessing on the drill field. to recruits, to other drill instructors. God put me in a wonderful position. But it was while there that God called me to preach. Now, when God called me to preach, I was nearing the end of my second enlistment. I had planned on making it a career. Obviously, that didn't happen. God had other plans. And so the long and short of it, I arranged. I knew where there was a school. I sought some counsel on where to go to school. And so I went off to Bible college. The problem is when I graduated, I had a lot of questions. Now, I went to a Bible college where they taught dispensationalism. And I didn't get all my questions answered. As a matter of fact, there were some things in dispensationalism, and I'll give you an example, that didn't fit with me. For example, people under the law, under the dispensation of the law, were saved by faith and works, keeping obedience to the law, according to certain teachers of dispensationalism. And I had a problem with that. So then I began to even look further into covenant theology. Long story short, I saw some good things there, just like there were some good things in dispensationalism. And over the years of going to school, over the years of learning, and then being in the ministry, one day, alone with God, I came up with a conclusion that there were some solid points in dispensationalism, and there were some solid points in Calvinism. And if you compared the two just right, they actually fit together quite nicely. Now, there's a lot of people disagree with me, okay? Calvinists, 5-point Calvinists, don't necessarily like that too much. I went to my mentor and I told him what I felt, and he smiled. He said, "You figured it out, didn't you?" Folks, listen, I'm not here to bash anybody. I'm just here to tell you, Calvinism as taught by John Calvin has some problems, okay? And so I'm going to focus on one problem, just one, okay? So let me get into this, okay? I'm going to give some definitions. I'm going to bring you some stuff up on the screen. And so, yeah, you're not going to get to see my smiling face for the whole thing. You'll get to see my smiling face for part of it. Whenever I put something up, take it back, and just want to talk to you for a while, a good bit of this will be with the screen. So let's get moving, and let's see what happens, okay? And ignore the little horn that's off on the side. My phone is texting like crazy. It's just going, and I'm not going to answer it right now. I know what it is. I'm part of a group of people that text each other, and they're just going nuts with me right now, okay? Determinism and fatalism in Calvinism, part 1, the problem, okay? So let's just move right along, okay? Let's move right along. What is fatalism? Fatalism, according to the Merriam-Webster, Merriam-Webster.com dictionary, fatalism, as you can see the link right there. Fatalism is a noun. It is the belief that what will happen has already been decided and cannot be changed. That's very important. What has happened, or what will happen, what will happen has already been decided and cannot change. Now, the question is, why? Well, that would take us to our next word, determinism, okay? The Merriam-Webster dictionary defines determinism as a philosophy, the belief that all events are caused by things that happen before them, and that people have no real ability to make choices or control of what happens. Biblically speaking, determinism is when God decides what's going to happen. That's the cause for why things happen. And people have no real ability to make choices or control about what happens. God determines everything, okay? Now, here's a verse for example, that would support determination of a particular event. Notice I said a particular event, okay? Acts 2:24 says, ye men of Israel. By the way, whenever I do this, I put the whole sentence. And as you can see, it starts up here in verse 22, starts the beginning of a sentence. Verse 24 is the end of the sentence. The other two verses end with a colon, meaning as you go down, it keeps being more definitive, okay? Ye men of Israel, hear these words. Jesus of Nazareth, a man approved of God among you by miracles and wonders and signs, which God did by him in the midst of you, as ye yourselves also know, him. Now, him. This is Jesus of Nazareth. This is the subject here, Jesus of Nazareth, being delivered by the determinate counsel and foreknowledge of God. Here is the event. The event that was the determinate counsel was him being delivered. Okay? That event right there, him being delivered, was the action of the determinate counsel. The word determinate here, if you say determine here, it would be a verb. But since it is identifying the type of counsel, it is actually an adjective. Okay, it's actually an adjective because it's describing what kind of counsel. And then it says, and foreknowledge. Now we have the conjunction and, okay? The word and, I just said, is a conjunction. It connects two separate things. The word foreknowledge is a noun, okay? Foreknowledge is not determinate. Foreknowledge is foreknowledge. That's a noun. When you say determinate counsel, that is an adjective, or you say, I'm going to determine something, that is then a verb. Okay? So they're not even the same part of speech. Okay? They're not even the same part of speech. They're two separate words, and that's very, very, very important. But the fact of the matter is, and then it continues on to say, ye have taken, they're talking about still Jesus, ye have taken, and by wicked hands have crucified and slain. Now, why did they do that? They did that by the determinate counsel. God was going to get Jesus on that cross. He just used wicked men to do it. Okay? Whom God hath raised up, still talking about Jesus, okay? Still talking about Jesus. Whom God hath raised up, having loosed the pains of death, because it was not possible that he should be holden of it. The fact of the matter is, though, that the determinate counsel here, what was determined was Jesus being crucified, being delivered up to be crucified. That event. Now, does that mean that every single event in all of time is determined by God? Well, according to John Calvin, the answer is yes. However, I would challenge a Calvinist to show me a verse in the Bible that says every single action is determined by God, because we got a problem, which we'll get to later. Okay, so let's move on here. Okay, here is this is just an informative slide for everybody. Okay, now what I'm going to show you is from the Institutes of Religious, or from of the Christian religion, which is the work of John Calvin. Okay, he published it in Latin in 1536, and he is describing or defining Reformed theology. That's what he's talking about, which is commonly known today as Calvinism. Okay, the biblical excerpts like the one you just saw, and if there's any more, I actually had to take this whole lesson and split it in half because it was just too long. And in the next part of this, there's a lot more Bible verses that will go with it. But I just need to make a point in this first part called the problem. And so that my excerpts are from the King James Bible. As stated above, excerpts are taken from the Institutes of Christian Religion by John Calvin. Now, I want you to take notice to something, okay? I want you to look, and I want to hide this because I don't know if anybody can see this. There's a little block on my screen, okay? There was a little block that I had to hide because I want to make sure you can read the bottom line, okay? You see how it says, the second one up from the bottom, as stated above, excerpts are taken from the Institutes of the Christian Religion by John Calvin. References are indicated as, and then it says, parentheses, 3.25.5, parentheses. Now, what that equals is, okay, if you look at that and you go, what does that mean? Well, what that means is book 3, chapter 21, section 5, okay? And so what I literally did was I went to this website that you see right there across the bottom of the screen where it says www.ccel. Or actually says www.ccel.org/CCEL/Calvin/institutes/ that. If you go there, and I'm leaving it here for a reason, so you can look at your computer and bounce back and forth and jump between screens, and you can look at it, and you could go to that page if you want to, okay, in order to see exactly on every. I'm always going to put this little thing in quotations to show you exactly where I got my information, so you know I'm taking this right from something John Calvin said. Okay, so let's move on here to the first slide. Now, it's not listed as double predestination. This is just known as double predestination, this teaching, okay? By predestination, this is the words of John Calvin in book 3, chapter 21, and section 5. The matter of fact, I just took this and put it in the lead screen there. This is his words. By predestination, we mean the eternal decree of God. In other words, hey, this is determined. Look at the very next line. By which he determined. Folks, when something's determined with God or by God, it will happen. I'm going to come off the screen. I mean, I'm going to come off of here just for a moment, okay? Because I need to talk to you just for a moment, okay? You need to understand something, folks. You need to understand something. When it says determined by God, okay, that isn't maybe. That isn't maybe. When God said Jesus is going to be delivered up and go to the cross, he meant it. And nothing was going to stop that from occurring. Okay? It was going to be done. God was going to make sure he got to the cross. Okay? It would kind of be like if you're a parent and you have children. You know, one of the things when you have teenagers, especially teenage girls, okay, sometimes they want to dress a little inappropriately and you know, they'll come out maybe or something and they'll be in something that's a little skimpier than you want them to go out in public in. And you go, that ain't happening. And she'll go, come on, man, what's the problem? And you go, that ain't happening. See, what are you doing? You're determining what's going to happen. And you say, you ain't going out with that on. Oh, and they'll throw a temper and they'll pout. They'll go back, they'll change it. Because when you push it and you make them, then they'll have to be subject to you, okay? Now, with God, when God says, I've determined this is going to happen, it's going to happen. It's just that simple. You must understand that at this point. When God says, I've determined this is my decree, you ain't stopping it. It's happening. Is it simple enough? Okay, good. That's simple enough. Let's go back to there. Okay. So here we are, back where we were. Okay. Actually, I clicked the wrong one. There we go. I'm trying to get back in. There we are. Double predestination. Now, by the way, there's a lot of Calvinists that say, I don't like double predestination. Okay. Listen to me very carefully. I want you to see what John Calvin said. By predestination, we mean the eternal decree of God by which he determined with himself whatever he wished to happen with regard to every man. All are not created on equal terms. These are the words of John Calvin. Okay? All are not created on equal terms, but some are preordained to eternal life, other to eternal damnation. And according as each has been created for one or other of these ends, we say that he has been predestinated to life or to death. Very important. There are many people, there are many Calvinists that will say, well, that doesn't mean, when we talk about the elect, that doesn't mean God is actually ordaining the other ones to go to hell. It just means he elected some not to go to hell. That's not what John Calvin taught. That's not what the true doctrine means, and you can read it right there on your screen. These are the words of John Calvin, the man that came up and developed this in such a way where it was in concrete, so to speak, okay? This is the foundation of TULIP right here, okay? Double predestination. You can't just say, well, the elect are ordained, but not the other. Listen, if there's only two destinations, if you ain't going to one, you're going to the other one. It's just that plain and that simple. If you didn't get picked to go to Chicago, well, then you're going to Los Angeles. You know what I'm saying? Okay, now, ultra determinism. I have this title up here, ultra. When I say ultra, the reason I'm saying ultra, because I want you to notice the level at which this reaches, okay? Because if you listen to a true 5-point Calvinist, they will say everything that happens, God determined it. If you're at a place, as a matter of fact, if you are watching this right now, it has been determined by God for you to do that. But let's look and see what John Calvin said in the Institutes, Book 1, Chapter 16, Verse 6. This is what he said. Scripture, moreover, the better to show that everything done in the world. What does everything mean? I think it means everything. I'm not sure. Yeah. Everything means everything, folks. Everything done in the world is according to his decree. Now, he's going to explain this. Declares that the things which seem most fortuitous are subject to him. In other words, the things that seem chance, they're not chance. They're decreed by God. Here's an example. For what seems more attributable to chance than that the branch which falls from a tree and kills the passing traveler, but the Lord sees very differently and declares that he delivered him, that's the God, the passing traveler, into the hand of the slayer. That would be the branch of the tree. God delivered this person to that tree so that branch could come down and kill him. There is no such thing as chance. There is no such thing as anything like that according to Calvinism. According to John Calvin, if you're if you're walking along and there is no chance, folks. That's what this teaches. And you happen to get killed, well, guess what? God said, it was your time to go, boy. Okay? And I'm not saying it wasn't your time, but I mean, all I'm saying is it's all planned by God, but it gets better. It gets better. Alter determinism 2. Let us suppose, for example, that a merchant, after entering a forest in company with trustworthy individuals. By the way, if anybody thinks I'm taking any of this out of content, please look it up. Because all this is a section where he gives illustration after illustration after illustration to make his point over and over again. Let me start over. Let us suppose, for example, that a merchant, after entering a forest in company with trustworthy individuals, imprudently, consequently, whatever, strays from his companions and wanders bewildered till he falls into a den of robbers and is murdered. His death was not only foreseen by the eye of God, but had been fixed by his decree. God chose for him to go off the course and be killed. That's what it says. That wasn't an accident. That was killed. God lined it up and killed him on purpose. Okay? Let's move on. Number 3. As all contingencies whatsoever depend on it. This is very important, folks. Therefore, neither thefts, nor adulteries, nor murders are perpetrated without an interposition of the divine will. Now, I want you to get this. When I read the 10 Commandments, commandment number 8 is, thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not steal. Okay? Now, commandment number 7 is, thou shalt not commit adultery. Commandment number 6, thou shalt not murder. And yet, it says right here, are perpetrated without an interposition of the divine will. God willed this theft to take place. God willed the adultery to take place. God willed the murder to take place. Excuse me? Are you saying God willed sin to take place? That's exactly what John Calvin says. Please continue to the next paragraph, okay? As you can see, by the way, that was book 1, chapter 17, section 1. This is just 4 sections later, okay? I concede more. In other words, he's got a lot more examples. I concede more that thieves and murderers and other evildoers are instruments of divine providence, being employed by the Lord himself to execute judgments which he has resolved to inflict. So God, by his will, decrees that thievery take place even though he commands you not to do it. He decrees murders to take place even though he commanded you not to do it. Other evildoers. What could we think of there? Babies being raped, child molestation, women being raped. How many evil things could you think of? And yet he says, are instruments of divine providence, being employed by the Lord himself to execute judgments. I'm sorry, I'm beginning to have a problem here. Because this is not the God I read about in the Bible. Okay? He never wills for sin to take place. Okay? He never wills for sin to take place. Let me carry on. Abominations to God. Hence, even infants, bringing their condemnation with them from their mother's womb, suffer not for another's, but for their own defect. Babies are defective from the womb. They are defective. Okay? I don't know what they did wrong, but they're defective. For although they have not yet produced the fruits of their own unrighteousness, they have the seed implanted in them. Nay, their whole nature, as it were, is a seedbed of sin, and therefore cannot be but odious and abominable to God. Wait a minute. Let me understand this right. John Calvin is telling me that a baby, an infant from its mother's womb, is odious to him and abomination to God? Excuse me? Folks, I'm not making this up. It's right there. Look it up. It's right there. I had to double check this. When I read it, I had to go back and read it again. The first time I read it. Listen. You see this note? According to the very words of John Calvin, infants are defective and odious and abominable to God. Listen, I'm not making this up, folks. Okay? I'm not making this up. Oh. Not yet. I'll just move on. Okay. Yeah. Here's the deal, folks. We're going to change the subject here because now, I want you to keep in mind, everything is determined by God up to this point. Okay? Everything up to this point was determined by God, according to Calvinism. But then look what it says here. The free will of Adam. Choice. Number one. There's 3 slides here coming about this because I wanted literally to put this whole section 8 on here so you can see it. I'm going to read quickly. Okay, and I'm going to, the first slide here, I'll read the whole thing quickly, and then the rest of them, I'm just going to take what's in red or what's underlined, okay? To this he joined will to which choice belongs. When you have a will, you have choice. Man excelled, he's talking about the way Adam was made, okay? He was made with a free will. Man excelled in these noble endowments in his primitive condition when reason, intelligence, prudence, and judgment not only suffice for the government of his earthly life, but also enable him to rise up to God and eternal happiness. Therefore, choice was added to the direct appetites and temper all the organic motions, the will being thus perfectly submissive to the authority of reason. In this upright state, man possessed freedom of will, by which, if he chose, he was able to obtain eternal life. Okay? He was able to choose eternal life or death. It were here unseasonable to introduce the question concerning the secret predestination of God, because we are not considering what might or might not happen, but the nature of man truly was. Wait a minute. Did that say concerning the secret predestination of God? Because we are not considering what might or might not happen? We're talking about Adam. And we're talking about why Adam fell. By the way, yeah, that was the whole purpose of this right here, was to determine why Adam fell. Okay, that was this section. And then they say, we're not going to talk about the secret questions concerning the secret predestination of God concerning Adam. That's what it's talking about. So in the next sentence, he says, where it's underlined at the bottom, it says, Adam therefore might have stood if he chose, since it was only by his own will that he fell. But it was because his will was pliable in either directions. He had not received constancy to persevere, so that he easily fell. Still he had a free choice of good and evil, and not only so, but in the mind and will there was the highest rectitude, and all the organic parts were duly framed to obedience until man corrupted its good properties and destroyed himself. So John Calvin says there was this secret predestination, but we're not going to talk about that. What we're going to talk about is that Adam had free will. Now, we're going to get to this in a minute. But Adam had free will. And since Adam had free will, he chose whatever he wanted, good or evil, and he oopsied. He corrupted himself. He destroyed himself. Okay? Part 2 of the same thing. Hence the darkness. Anyway, he rants on there for a while. Okay? Come down to the middle where it's underlined. At present, it is necessary only to remember that man in his first creation was very different from all his posterity, who, deriving their origin from him after he was corrupted. This is the reason why all of us are doomed for hell, because Adam messed up, okay? Received a hereditary taint. At first, every part of the soul was formed to rectitude. There was soundness of mind and freedom of will to choose good. In other words, before the fall, hey, there was soundness of mind. After the fall, well, too bad. All gone. Okay? Look at what it says in red at the bottom. For surely the deity. I love this sentence. Okay, I'm sorry. I had to just pause for a moment. For surely the deity could not be tied down to this condition. Here's the condition. To make man such that he either could not or would not sin. Such a nature might have been more excellent. Isn't that what the atheists say all the time? Why didn't God just make it that he wouldn't sin? Wouldn't that have been much better? Oh, man, John Calvin was actually thinking like an atheist that day. All right. Last section. It says here, after the see somebody else there, it says, but to apostolate with God. Okay, I want to get right down to the red, okay? Why did he not sustain him by the virtue of perseverance is hidden in his counsel. Now, wait a minute. God could. He says God could have made Adam persevere, and why he didn't is just unknown. We don't know. That's the secret with God. Man had received the power if he had the will, but he had not the will, which would have given the power. For this will would have been followed by perseverance. Still, after he had received so much, there is no excuse for his having spontaneously brought death upon himself. Why, Adam, why did you do that? Why in the world did you not have the power to persevere? I mean, you were of sound mind. Why didn't you reason and go, this would not be good? Well, let me move on. Okay, here's a definition of choice. We're talking about choice. The act of choosing, the voluntary act of selecting or separating from two or more things that which is performed, or the determination of the mind in preferring one thing to another. Election. See, God does the choosing according to Calvinism. Man, Adam, had the ability to choose. He could determine. Now, you know down there at number 2, or where it says 2 at the bottom, the power of choosing option. This is very important. Where there is force, there can be no choice. Of these alternatives, we have our own choice. So look at that line there right below number 2 where it says, where there is force, there is no choice. Let me come out here for a minute and talk to you just for a moment. Okay? All right. We have 2 things we've been presented with. 2. Number 1, we have been presented with determinism. That God decrees or determines everything, even the sins that are committed. Okay? On the other hand, we have Adam having a free will. I want you to think with me for a minute. Okay? Determinism is when one person says, and here in this case, it's a sovereign God is determining every event that will happen. He is forcing everything to happen. He says there are no choices. This is the way it will go. Over here is Adam. And Adam has a choice. He can either have a relationship with God, or he cannot have a relationship with God. God says to Adam, Adam, you can choose to have a relationship with me, or you can choose to disobey me and eat that piece of fruit, and that will sever our relationship because you will die. Talking about spiritually. Adam, according to this teaching, had free will, and God had determined everything. Okay? Listen very carefully. Okay? Don't lose me. Okay? Don't lose me. Let me hide this. The sovereignty of God. Isaiah 46:10, declaring the end from the beginning, and from the ancient times, the things that are not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand. I will do all my pleasure. Calling a ravenous bird from the east, the man that executeth my counsel from a far country, yea, I have spoken it, I will also bring it to pass. I have purposed it, I will also do it. Okay? Now I'm going to ignore that bottom question I asked because I'm teaching this somewhere else. And I'm getting into other things in that I'm not getting into here. And so I'm just speaking about one subject here. But here is a verse that the Calvinists use to show that God is sovereign, that he purposes and he does. He purposes and he does. Stay with me. Oh, do you remember earlier I had dominoes? Here's the dominoes. Okay? You see the screen? The dominoes? Huh? Everybody knows what the domino effect is, right? You stand up dominoes. Like you see right in front of you. You stand up dominoes. So that when you push the first one, it knocks over the next set, which knock over the next set, and so forth and so on. Okay? You push that one over, then that one falls over, then that one falls over. That's called the domino effect. That's pretty simple, isn't it? Now, here's the problem. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read this, and then I'm going to come out so you can see my face again. Okay? The problem, 3 covenants. In Reformed theology and covenant theology, there's 3 major covenants. You have the covenant of redemption, which was made with the Godhead, within the Godhead, for man's redemption, and it was made prior to the creation. Number 2, you have the covenant of works, which God made, which was between God and man in the garden, made in the Garden of Eden after the creation. And then you have the covenant of grace, made between God and man, made available to man after Adam transgressed. Okay? Now let me come on out here for a second again. Okay? 3 covenants. Okay? You have the covenant of redemption, where the Godhead decided. Now keep this in mind. This is before he ever said, let there be light. This is before he ever made time. This is before any of that. This is outside of time in the eternal realm, whatever that might be. Okay? God made the covenant of redemption. The covenant of redemption was God's covenant within himself that he would redeem fallen or man after he had transgressed. Okay? You got to stick with me, folks. Prior to the creation, God in heaven or God in the eternal realm made a covenant to redeem man because he knew man would fall. Now, according to Calvinism, this was predetermined. This is determinism. Okay? Because according to Calvinism, God's foreknowledge or God's omniscience is based on determinism. What God determined by the determinate council. I'm just telling you, they're putting the cart before the horse. And I can explain why in a different video, but I'm not going to do that. Okay? They're trying to say that the reason God knows about the future is because he determines the future. Are you with me? God determines the future, hence he knows the future because he determined the future. So prior to him making time, God already had the plan of redemption. The plan of redemption was not, what am I going to do now? It was already in play. Hang on here. You see these? You see these? If you set these up, I don't know if I can do this or not. If you set these up, I doubt it's going to let me do it. You all know about dominoes, you know what I mean? You set them up, you push the first one over, and they all fall over, right? They go doot, 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 right? Before the third domino can fall, the second domino has to fall. And before the second domino falls, the first domino has to fall. Usually, it's done like this. Okay? If you set the dominoes all up, you know, whether it be 10 or 1,000, they're all sitting there behaving. It's not until you walk up and go, beep, that you get to watch it all. And you hope somebody don't come in there and bump the table, right? Ah! You ruined it. Remember this. Remember this. I got to hurry. I'm running out of time. I'm running out of time, folks. All right. Remember, the covenant of redemption made first. The covenant of works was in the garden. When God said, in the day thou eatest thereof, thou shalt surely die. Now keep in mind, Adam was supposed to have a free will. And then after Adam transgressed, then everybody's condemned. But see, there's a little problem here, folks, in case you didn't pick it up already. How did God know that there was going to have to be a plan of redemption before he made man if Adam had a free will and could have maybe chosen not to sin? You ever think about that? If Adam truly had free will, how did God know he would sin or would not sin? Unless he looked into the future somehow. Which Calvinists say can't happen because then God would have learned and based his decision on something he learned, and that's impossible. So that can't even be an option. Here we are. The covenant of redemption applies to the elect of all generations. There could be saved people in every generation. And the covenant of redemption, remember, was made prior to Adam sinning. According to Calvinism, according to John Calvin, Adam had a free will. The first domino is Adam. How did God know what Adam would choose to do? If he truly had free will, how did God know? Because according to Calvinism, God can't look into the future and learn. All of the future is foreknown because of and based on determinism. In other words, the reason God knows is because he determines it. Wait a minute. We got a little problem here. Okay. Adam had a free will. How did God know what Adam would choose to do? The only way to have determinism after Adam is to determine Adam's choice. Did you hear me? He had to determine Adam to fall. Well, now we have a problem. Okay? What would have happened if Adam didn't transgress? What would happen then? See, if Adam didn't transgress, there would be no need for a plan of redemption. Everything hinges on what Adam does. He has a free will, supposedly, How did God know he was going to sin, that he already had a plan in play? Was it a contingency plan? Well, that's impossible, because that would have meant that the first plan would have gone wrong. That's what a contingency plan is. Or was it, in fact, the first plan determined by God? Adam had a free will. How did God know what Adam would choose to do? The only way for God to know what Adam would choose to do without determinism would be to look and learn, look in the future and learn. But we know that's not an option. Calvinism's foreknowledge is based on determinism. Calvinism, when they say God is omniscient, they say it's because it's based on what God determines to happen. You got to get this, folks. The question of the hour is, was Adam determined to fall, or did he have a free will? John Calvin says that everything God does is determined, but John Calvin also said he had a free will. These are opposite teachings, folks. They are opposite teachings. You can't determine Adam to fall and give Adam free will. That is a logical fallacy. It would be, here's an example. It would be like you saying, if you had a kid, hey, tomorrow morning we're going to Disneyland. You want to go? Nah, I don't like Mickey Mouse. Oh, it's really great. You can go if you want to. Nah, I'm just going to stay here and sleep in. You all are getting up way too early to go down there for me. All right, but you don't know what you're going to miss out. So at 4 o'clock in the morning, Mom and Dad go, hey, Johnny, you in there? Johnny's like, huh? What? Hey, Johnny, we're leaving. All right, bye. No, you got to get in the car. You told me I didn't have to go. No, you're going. Well, you told me that I had a choice. I know, but you're going. We've already determined you're going with us. Well, when did you do that? Oh, yesterday, before we asked you, we already determined you were leaving and going with us. Well, then why did you tell me I had a free will then? Why did you tell me I could make a choice? Oh, it sounded good, Johnny, but you're gone. Get your clothes on now. We're going to be late. See, they're opposites, folks. They're opposites. You cannot have a free will and be forced to do something through determination. I'm sorry, or through determinism. I'm sorry, it's opposite. Did God determine Adam to transgress? Or did God look into the future to learn what he would do? And I kind of typed that wrong, but anyway, either answer is problematic for Calvinism. You see, folks, if God did what John Calvin said, and he already determined everything, and he does determine everything, that means he determined Adam to fall. And now we have a problem. You know what the problem is? You see that little red arrow? God pushed it. Adam didn't have a free will. He was just told he had a free will. But God pushed him so that he would sin. Because through determinism, he had to sin, or God's plan of redemption would be for no reason. That's just the way it is, folks. I want you to think about something, okay? I want you to think about something. Some of you may not agree with me, and that's okay. I want you to think about the fact there are Calvinists that say, oh, it was free will and determined. That's a logical fallacy. Can't happen. If you tell me I have free will, then you don't determine what I do. If you determine what I do, I don't have free will. It's that plain. It's that simple. For example, I'm sitting right here, right now. Was that determined by God? Or do I have a free will? Adam stood in the Garden of Eden. Adam, according to John Calvin, had the choice of either going and taking the fruit and eating it or not eating it. But on the other hand, John Calvin teaches that everything is determined. Does that mean that God grabbed Adam, so to speak, took him over there and said, Eve, feed him? See, the fact of the matter is, folks, you cannot. This is something that needs to be reconciled. You cannot logically be determined by the sovereign God. He cannot make a decree and say, you are determined by my sovereign counsel to do this and still have a free will pertaining to this. It's impossible. If God says the branch is going to fall, the branch is going to fall. The branch can't say, excuse me, God, but not today. That's the way it is, folks. It's just that plain. It's just that simple. God either determined or Adam had a free will. But you can't have both. You can't have both. And see, the whole thing about Calvinism is the sovereignty of God. It is determinism. And according to John Calvin, it is ultra determinism. I showed you right out of John Calvin's own writings what he said. There is no such thing as chance. If there's no such thing as chance anywhere else in the world, then there was no such thing as chance in the Garden of Eden. Adam, if, as Calvinists say, he was determined to transgress, well, then he didn't have a free will, folks, and we got a problem. This isn't what I believe, but it's what Calvin teaches. If Adam was determined to fall by the sovereign decree of God, guess who decreed sin to come into mankind so that we would all deserve hell? That's right. It wasn't Adam. It was God. I'm a little smarter than that, folks. Not much, but a little. I'm going to make a comment here at the end. Do you want to know why atheists make these statements that God is the author of sin? Because of the teachings of Calvinism that God determined everything. They understand determinism better than Calvinism does, or than Calvinists do about their own teaching. They understand that if God determined that to happen, according to what you're saying, then this is it. This is one of the reasons why it can't be true. Well, by the way, if that's not true, we have a major problem in Calvinism anyway then. Because you see, the entire tulip rests upon determinism. The entire tulip rests upon determinism. But we already know that's problematic. Because determinism is the root of fatalism. And just to throw in a freebie, since you have determinism, since everything is already determined and now you have fatalism, everything is the way it's going to be, why does God have us pray? Why? If everything's going to be the way it's going to be according to the decree of God, what's the purpose of praying? There isn't any. Well, we know that's not true, don't we? So we have a problem. Anyway, that's the deal. I hope I shed some light, or at least gave you something to think about, to say, is it determinism? Did God determine Adam to fall, or did Adam fall because of his own free will? But they cannot both be true because it's logically impossible. You cannot determine to throw this hand, okay, if it's only a one or the other situation. You can't have free will and determination. It's impossible, folks. The meanings are opposite. Where there's force, there can't be a choice. Remember that. Where there's force, there can't be a choice. Determinism is force. It's just that simple. It's just that plain. Folks, I'm not out here to stir up trouble. I'm here to make you think. I'm here to make you think. I've prayed about this long and hard before making this video. And I hope somebody out there thinks. I really do. I hope somebody thinks. So you all have a good night. Think about it. Pray about it. Read your Bible and do what it says. Thanks for joining me. Night all.